You don't need to feel pain in order to make a change.
Right.
You need to feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it has to be all or nothing.
When you change the language, you change the behavior. You change the belief, you change the behavior.
Most of transformation happens in the day-to-day micro evolutions, little bit by little bit, one day at a time. I think that's where the magic is.
If you're so unhappy where you are, if you move a little bit closer to where you want to be, how much worse can it be?
Welcome to the Living Richly podcast. We are so happy to have you join us today. And speaking of today, we're going to be talking about making meaningful changes in our lives. Wow. Aside from the fact that we've switched up the set, right?
This is pretty meaningful because for so long I'm used to that side of the table. This side of the studio just feels so weird.
It feels really weird.
Yes, it was a very meaningful change, and I think we've gotten used to it, but we're not sure.
We're not quite sure yet.
In all seriousness, talking about making meaningful changes in our lives, and I think we should just start with this. So, Eric, I'm going to just throw this out to you right away.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what the most common misconceptions are when we think about transforming our lives, when people think about that and some of those obstacles and hurdles that we try to overcome.
Oh, I love that, especially as we're kind of like in resolution land right now, that time of year where people are thinking, making those changes. For me, I think there's two of them that really stand out in terms of myths that we need to debunk. And one is the, if it's going to be, it's up to me myth. And the other is the one size fits all myth, right? That first one, if it's going to be, it's up to me. I understand that any change that we make in our lives has to be, we have to make the decision, we have to make the choice. But I think we undervalue the importance of community and people supporting us in making those changes. And I think that's why often change feels so out of touch or so out of reach, is because we're trying to sustain it in our own steam, under our own steam. The other one is this notion of, it worked for me, surely it's going to work for you, right? The one size fits all. And actually we are in the coaching industry. I mean, Rob, you and I, this is what we do for a living. And if you read self-help books, if you read anything about self-improvement, often it's being served up as a formula, right? Do A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, and you'll get the results that I got. And I think
you should have sung there.
How did you miss it? What did I say? You didn't jump in.
ABC.
1, 2, 3. Right?
Steve, are you there? Are you going to join us?
Hey! But I think there's so much that's presented as formula to be imitated or duplicated, as opposed to principles perhaps to be then adapted and made our own. But yeah, I think that one size fits all, and if it's up to me, or if it's going to be, it's up to me. Those things are just
and just to jump in a bit on that second one as well, because we see this certainly in our old world, the old life of our church world when we were pastors.
You keep bringing that up.
I do.
I wish you'd change that.
No, I embrace it. I embrace my past because of what I've learned through it. But one of the things that would happen often in that world was, for example, there was a particular church. I'm not going to actually. I was about to name it. I thought, no, I better not, because I know that it hasn't ended well there. But there was a church.
Well, now everyone wants to know.
Yeah, well, they can Google church model that came on the scene that really was absolutely huge, and it had this whole emphasis around purpose driven, right? It was this method and this model, and every church was trying to mimic every element of it. If we're going to grow into a mega church, a super church, we have to follow this structure, this plan. We got to and people were changing the craziest things in these small town community country church. We're changing them to this big city model. And of course it didn't work. It fell flat because they were trying to mimic somebody else's plan.
Well, it's I've often used the phrase, don't duplicate, innovate. This isn't about looking at somebody else's journey. Yeah. I think we can all learn from each other and learn. There's I glean from any book that I read, any video that I watch. I'm going to glean something that's of value. Yeah. But it's not about copy paste into my life and it's going to look the same.
Right.
I think we have to take those concepts, we have to take those lessons and then adapt them for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I think another good myth is that meaningful change has to be massive
right.
in scope. There's so much change that we can do that has deep meaning, that can be a small change, something I'm meditating more. That's a small, very meaningful change for me.
Right.
Me getting divorced, massive change, right?
You don't want to be doing that every day.
No. But I think sometimes when we think about change, we think of it as this big thing, and it doesn't always have to be.
And sometimes I think we tie it into our self-worth, where we don't recognize that the small changes are sometimes the most powerful ones that compounded over time.
Right.
Can end up then transitioning into massive changes.
I heard it said before that we often overestimate what we can accomplish in one day and underestimate what we can accomplish in a year.
Yeah.
I was just talking with a leader yesterday who has been really working hard, working through some really tough stuff, and unable to see the progress, unable to celebrate the wins. And it took a conversation where I said, like, think of how far you've come in the last several months and these small changes that you've made and how far it's led you. I think when we approach it, I agree with you 100%. When we approach meaningful change as sweeping changes in our lives, there are going to be seasons where that's true, and we need to make big sweeping changes. But I think most of transformation happens in the day-to-day micro evolutions, little bit by little bit, one day at a time. I think that's where the magic is.
For me, one of the big myths around change is that failure is not an option. Right? Failure is not only an option; it's almost a guarantee.
And one of the best teachers.
And one of the best teachers, and so we are either we are afraid to make a change because what if I fail?
Right.
Or when we do fail after making change, we give up.
Yep.
And in both those cases, of course, we're missing the gem of what really is about change, about doing these meaningful changes.
Yeah, love that.
Tied into yours and coming from the gym world, would be no pain, no gain. I think that is the biggest bullshit line. And I will never use that when I'm coaching people, because I feel like, you don't need to feel pain in order to make a change. You need to feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it has to be all or nothing.
I love that, because this, again, no pain, no gain. Talk about a statement that is ingrained in the North American mindset. Let's face it, often pain is a powerful motivator. Some of the most meaningful changes in my life, it took pain to get me started. What's the saying? Until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain required to change, we often aren't motivated enough.
Right.
But if the whole journey has to be painful, I don't think that's true. I think pain can motivate, but then we need to switch to a different fuel, to keep us going on that journey.
100%.
Yeah. Which kind of ties into, if we think about meaningful change, because that could mean different things for a lot of people, how is that different? And I think we've all probably had this question before. How is that different than making, say, a New Year's resolution?
How many here actually make? Anybody here do resolutions?
I don't.
No, not anymore.
I have.
I've done them in the past.
I've done them many times in the past.
Yeah. So the question is, how's that different from making meaningful change?
Yeah. So how is, because right away people might think meaningful change, especially this time of year, how is that different than making, say, a New Year's resolution?
That's a great question. I'll just jump in because this came right into my mind as you said it. I think most resolutions are made out of regret.
Yeah.
I think people reach the end of the year. They're looking at their lives. They're not where they want to be. Perhaps they had made a decision or set an intention to do certain things this year, and they didn't get to them. They didn't make those changes. They didn't get into action around, or perhaps they started and got off track. And so I think the vast majority of resolutions, or at least a big majority of resolutions, are made from a place of guilt, shame, regret, and those are not. They do have those emotions carry energy, but it's not very good energy.
Yeah.
It's not made from a place of this is who I am. This is what really matters to me. Here's what I want to get out of this. I think resolutions are very flippant at the surface level. They're a wish and a hope as opposed to a commitment.
Yeah, and meaningful change is tied to what you said. It's your vision. What do you really want out of life? And that can happen anytime.
Right.
Right. It is not happening, to your point, at the end of the year. It's like, I didn't lose the 20 pounds I wanted to. So, okay, come Jan 1st, I'm going to go. And we all do that. Or, I'm not going to drink less, or I'm going to go go to bed earlier. I'm going to do this. But when you do it out of that place of like failure, like I didn't do it, so now I'm going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not really tied to like, if you have deep vision around wanting to do something, then you'll likely make meaningful change that lasts over time.
Yeah.
It doesn't flee after 3 weeks where you're like, I can't do this. Right?
Yeah, the lasting piece is huge.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people in our society, we expect things to happen right away. And if the change that we're trying to implement. I mean, I've been trying to change this whole seating plan.
It took this long to change just the seating arrangement, for Christ's sake.
But a lot of times we think, and we don't think about meaningful change as lasting change, to what you just said, Kate.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I find think of, I'm going to make this change, but if it doesn't show up in 24 hours, like my Amazon order will, then the change isn't working,
Right.
or they're not in tune with their internal GPS, knowing that part of that meaningful change, there's going to be some road closures. There's going to be, a shift in the weather, navigational direction.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people just give up
Yeah.
and stop trying to implement that change because it's not working to how they perceived it was supposed to be in their head.
Well, I think a lot of change when we talk about people it comes down to the difference between what is transformation.
Right.
When something transforms, it doesn't go back to its original form. Think of what's previous to a butterfly. It's
Caterpillar?
It's a caterpillar. Thank you. Wow.
It's a raccoon,
It's
actually.
a raccoon.
Yeah.
So when a raccoon spins that cocoon, when the raccoon enters the cocoon, I think the raccoon cocoon go really well together.
Yeah.
When the caterpillar spins the web and makes the cocoon, once it transforms, undergoes that transformation, there is no going back.
Right.
There is no going back. I think a lot of changes that people make and resolutions are temporary behavior modifications. I'm going to drink less. I'm going to go to the gym more.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose some weight. I'm going to invest more in my kids, whatever. Like I'm going to learn a new skill.
Yeah.
But we haven't gone deep enough. What we're looking at is the behavior that we want to either stop doing or start doing more of. But we don't get down to the why level of why this matters.
They're external. And so,
Thank you.
as we look at a
That
lot
was
of
so.
these,
I could have just said that and said the same thing. But I like to say things with more words.
With raccoons.
With raccoon words.
when the raccoon transforms into the bear, they're external. So one, we know this is that most New Year's resolutions you don't achieve them, or they don't
Blue
last.
Monday,
Monday, right? Within 3 weeks, most people have abandoned them. They've failed on them. And even if they do achieve them, there's an emptiness.
Yeah.
Because it didn't change the real question. It didn't affect which is internal.
Right.
And so you have an external activity. Oh, I've accomplished this. If we don't transform from the inside, none of that matters. And so it really is like how much of what we talk about in every one of these episodes, it comes back to starting point is looking internally.
Right. Well, think of what's one of the most common ones is getting it fit or losing some weight,
Sure.
right? How many folks are making that decision not because it's tied to something very meaningful to them, but rather are setting that because of society's expectations and definitions of what it means to look healthy.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's an external it's from the outside in as opposed to the inside out. And I don't think you can achieve transformation from the outside in. I truly believe it's an inside job. And I think meaningful change, but for me is synonymous with transformation, is that something internally has shifted for me in my thoughts, in my beliefs, in my mental models, in my understanding of how the world works. And because my belief has shifted, I am now wearing a new set of lenses. And so I approach life differently. That change is going to last.
Well, and your commitment level to that is very different. Your commitment level to a New Year's resolution is not high because it's not coming from that place of actually wanting change.
Yeah.
It's feeling like I need to change. Here's something I have to do.
I'm
supposed to change.
Yep.
So you're not attached to it. So you're not committed. You can commit for 3 weeks, right? And then it dwindles. When you're truly committed to change, it's a different story. It's a different outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which then can kind of tie into one of the biggest things people struggle with is consistency. Yeah. So people know.
I consistently struggle with that.
People know that they want to, I'd like to change this or I want to change this. So why do we as humans always gravitate to that thought in our head, but it's so hard, right? Don't know where to begin.
Earlier,
So why is change so hard, and how do we overcome that resistance?
I have a, it's not a theory. It's just, I think we've been so programmed as a society that change is hard. That's all we hear is that change is hard. It's so hard. It's difficult. Right. And so it's so, and we were talking upstairs and Eric's like, well, change is hard. And I'm like, change can be hard. Yeah. It's not always hard. It can be uncomfortable. Yeah. It can be scary. It can be exciting. It can be like, switch that to the positive. I think we have a very sort of negative connotation that's just formed out of what we've been told that it's hard. So yeah, and I'm not saying it's not hard, because change can be hard, but it's not only hard.
Right. Well, I think when you talk about just how you approach it, right? Like I think, just as you said that, like the thought I got in my mind was that oftentimes when we're thinking about making a change, we're focused on what we're going to miss out on, what we're going to lose, right? So I want to lose weight. I'm going to miss out on eating the way that I want.
Even when it's something we really, really want, that doesn't seem to be as front and foremost as, but I'm missing out on this.
I'm going to miss out because what we're literally walking away from what we know. Yeah. It's the age old battle between the devil I know, the devil I don't, right? We fear the unknown. We avoid the unknown. And so we will often gravitate and hold on to things that are unhealthy for us because we're afraid of what it would look like to not have that in our lives.
It's interesting. So the most successful program, and this is documented, there's proof around this, the most successful program for people who want to quit smoking is not a program, but a book. And it's a book called How to Quit Smoking by Alan Carr. How to Stop Smoking. Sorry, not How to Quit Smoking. How to Stop Smoking by Alan Carr. And he's
because quitting's easy.
Yeah.
I know people that have done it like millions of times.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And his whole premise of the book, and he actually says this in the very first chapter of the book, first paragraph of the book, I want you to keep smoking while you read the book. And he then goes into, and it's neurolinguistic programming and NLP in his mindset, where he basically says, what I want to do is I want you to change the thinking around who you are. You're not someone trying to quit smoking, because we don't like to give up. Yeah. He says you're a non-smoker.
Right, you're changing your belief.
Changing your belief, right? Because, and then he uses one of the examples in the book is this. So after a really good meal, what does a smoker do?
Smoke.
Has a cigarette. Yeah. Right? What does a non-smoker do?
Have dessert.
Or nothing.
A million things they could talk about. But what doesn't come into their mind is,
I need a cigarette.
So I smoked many, many years ago, but I don't finish a meal now and think, oh boy, would I ever like to have a smoke?
Right. Yeah.
I'm a non-smoker. I don't think about that. And he says, when you change the mindset. And so, but that whole premise of, he says, way too often, the reason why people fail to stop smoking is because they use the language, I need to quit smoking. I need to give up something. And he says, instead, when you change the language, you change the behavior. You change the belief, you change the behavior.
Right. But all of that, I love that. But so much of that requires you to get clear on what you actually want. Again, as opposed to responding to some external pressure or expectation or societal standard. Again, we've been talking about they, who are the they that set these standards that we all feel completely enslaved to. And now add the world of social media to, we've talked about it often on the show. Yeah. It is a world that is focused on externals, right? Yeah. There's not a lot of value placed on the internals of this world. It's how you look. It's how thin you are. It's how fat you are. Sorry, not fat. How fit you are. Fat fit, so for some people. All right.
You looked right at me. How fat.
Are you getting Stuntman Stu flashbacks right now? Is that what's
happening?
Stuntman
Stu.
Oh, that was good.
That was a glare.
But it's true. Like we're so programmed now to be like, it's always been there. Those societal expectations have been there. These are not new to the world of social media, but it seems like social media has just amplified that. I think of our kids and the pressure they're being raised.
Add in AI on top of that, and they're like, nothing's real. Yeah. Like nothing is real online anymore. Yeah. There is no actual.
The they is the free apps.
Right.
Yeah. Often, which are great for certain things.
Yep.
But then when it starts to seep into your mind and control your daily actions and decisions that you're making and how you're navigating your life, then that's when it can become
they are tools. They are neither good or bad.
That's right.
Right.
They are what we use them for. One of the things that I think of when I talk this whole notion of making changes is I go back to some of our original business coach training, Gleicher's formula for change.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And when she talks
Great
about
principle.
this notion of in order to overcome the resistance to change, and I love what you said about change isn't always bad. So true. When the equation is in place, it can be incredibly positive. I get to see this change.
Yeah.
But he says there's got to be three components in order to overcome the resistance to change. There's got to be some understanding of what your desired future is.
Yeah.
Right. There's got to be a dissatisfaction with your current reality.
Yep.
And then there needs to be clear concrete steps in order to achieve it.
Yeah.
And if those three pieces are there, you will overcome that resistance to change.
Right. There's an energy now behind what you're trying to do, because you've not just said, listen, I think a lot of folks' resolutions, as I said earlier, I think they come from dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with where I am. I'm not happy with the lack of progress I made this year. I'm not happy that I didn't achieve this goal.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling all this pressure. So I am dissatisfaction is a powerful force.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if there's not enough dissatisfaction, according to Gleicher, you're not going to move from where you are. There's no motivation, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But the where it gets really powerful with that equation is you're also painting a vision of what's possible, of where you want to be, and you're identifying the steps you need to take, and you're getting into action on it, as opposed to just saying, well, I'm unhappy weighing an extra 20 pounds and I'm going to make a resolution to lose that in the new year. Well, good luck with that unless you dig deeper.
Yes.
Yep.
Agreed.
If we kind of think about significant changes in our life, now this question, of course, wouldn't apply to me because
Well, you wouldn't
I
need to
haven't
make any
dealt with any
changes.
significant changes.
What do you mean?
But either from, what do you mean? Either from within ourselves or people around us. How did you face those significant changes? But how did you navigate around that?
So many.
That's a big question.
Yeah, and maybe not big, long stories, but even just small things that maybe have happened. So I'll just answer my own question.
So how would you?
So how would you navigate that, Wendy, and make it significant changes?
So for me, I would say one of the big ones would be my wellness journey, and learning how to navigate through that. And the big fear around that for me was not knowing where to start, knowing I was going to say needed to do something, but I don't want to use that language. I was in the place where I wanted to do something, but the fear of not sure where to start, don't know who to go to, feeling like I was at rock bottom, and using like weight loss as an example in an industry where there's just so much noise over, do this diet or try this or eat like this or don't do this and try this gym and this workout. I was just so overwhelmed that, that fear was very much holding me back from, so fear and laziness was holding me back from actually wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So in order for me to navigate that, it was really about kind of going back to my values as to what was important to me, and then being able to identify what was going to make me feel good, what was going to fit into my schedule, and what was I going to be able to be consistent with by not fixing 20 different things at once, but the top two things.
Right. You started somewhere. And I think that's, we overthink, oftentimes we overthink what's the best way to do this. What's the most time. They did a study in the book, the art of,
Art of Everyday Assertiveness?
No. I'm going to forget the name.
The Art of Living?
Brad Stuhlberg.
The Art of War?
I'll put it in the show notes. It's just escaping me right now.
With all these other art books.
Right. The Practice of Groundedness. Thank you is the name of it. The Practice of Groundedness.
Art's not even in it.
Art's not even in it. Those three letters are in the word practice. Yes. Thank you very much. But I was close. Anyway, he talks about how they did a study they were talking about the best diets, right? Or the most famous diets, whether it be, I don't know, there's so many of them now. Was it paleo? Is it this or keto, whatever? Yeah. And they also did a study on the best training regimen. What's the best training regimen by far? Do you know that they were not able to prove that any one was better than another? Do you know the ones that were the best? the ones people stuck with.
Yes.
And I recently heard on a podcast, and this guy's big on meditation, and he was talking in the context of meditation, but he says that most of us, that most success is about centering and focusing on 3 or 4 key fundamentals and staying with them. I think we get caught up in the new fads. We get caught up in the next and best thing.
Yeah.
And it's a distraction. It's a smokescreen. I think it was one of the generals involved in Desert Storm. Again, my memory's not helping me today, but he said that,
Schwarzkopf.
Thank you. He said I'm not going to quote him perfectly here, but he said a mediocre strategy well executed will beat a fancy strategy you do nothing on every day of the week.
So Micheal Easter, who wrote the book Comfort Crisis, which is, again, this whole notion of even the fact that we are uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
His follow-up book is a book that just came out a month ago or so, called The Scarcity Brain. And I won't get into the whole details of it, but one of the chapters is around information and how we have so much information, of course, and we know this, right? We have more information than we can ever digest in a lifetime, in 10 lifetimes.
Yeah.
But he says the problem here, and this is where the scarcity brain is, because the scarcity brain basically is this idea that we actually thrive best when we have less, right? And so, but in the case of information, because
Less
we have
is
so
more.
much information, like he said, we're at a place now where you could go online, like I need to fold my laundry.
I know.
You can go online and get 15 ways to fold your laundry,
You
right?
sure can.
Stuff that how to chew your food for best digestion, right? Like there's, and he uses a bunch of examples
Is
of
that
that.
a thing,
where,
really?
Well, anything, and it is a
Yeah.
thing. And,
It is a
and
thing.
So,
Really?
But it's this notion now that we are unable to just do we have complicated the most simplest
so
of
good.
tasks
Yeah.
to the point that we now have a generation of people who don't know how to act and do or think about anything without first, I got to find out what is the best way to do this, right?
Right.
Because everything has been, and so you go back to the notion of with diet, what's the best diet? And again, which the one you stick to, the fundamentals are the fundamentals. That's the part that hasn't changed no matter what diet or workout regime or anything like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, more calories out than calories in is the approach.
I think we're stuck in a microwave society, right? Where we think that, again, it's this instant change or the overnight delivery. You used the Amazon example earlier. And when things aren't then shifting for us fast enough, we think the solution is to change our approach. We're too impatient with the slowly by slowly, little by little, daily by daily, those micro evolutions. We're looking for those, and I think switching to another methodology is like a placebo. It makes us feel good. Oh, now I'm going to do this about this.
Right.
And it gives us the illusion that we're in control, but all we're doing is delaying in many cases. Now, of course, if we're trying something and it's ultimately really not working and we've given it a good go, then of course it makes sense to change your strategy, right? Like you don't keep flogging a dead horse. But I think we often, out of a level of impatience and this false notion of change should happen overnight or quickly, we keep taking all these detours and we never arrive at our destination.
So then how do we overcome that?
Yeah.
So if fear is the big thing, how do we then learn how to overcome that?
Yeah.
So like maybe one tip from everyone.
I think it's, you gotta, I always talk about this, but it's micro steps. It's moving slowly. It's, if it is scary to you, I think you also have to ask yourself, like, what is so scary, right? Because if you're so unhappy where you are, we're talking about meaningful change. If you're so unhappy where you are, if you move a little bit closer to where you want to be, how much worse can it be? Like, so take that one step and try and move. So I think I just believe in the power of those little micro, if you can just move a little bit closer and then a little bit closer and then a little bit closer, it might not feel so overwhelming.
Yeah,
so scary.
I love that because we're often, again, we're focused on what it's going to cost me to make this change.
Yeah.
And we often aren't present to, well, what's the cost of not making it?
Yeah.
But we think that the cost is only associated with making the shift, when in reality, we're paying a price right now.
Where you are.
Right? So if you're in a dead-end job going nowhere and you're afraid of taking the leap because it might mean, I don't know, a drop in salary for a while. It might mean but you're paying, what you're paying a price right now, but our focus is so much on what I'm going to miss out on if I take this leap.
Totally.
We forget about the terrible costs we're paying daily to stay in our current situation. So we got to get present to that.
Yeah.
I love that. I think another one, and this, again, I have to think this through a bit more. I'm going to say it and I still have to think it through, so you can jump in if you think I'm crazy on it. But
you bet we will.
Is asking the question, why does it matter?
Right.
So why do you need to do this? Why is this important to you? What the thought that came to my mind was, again, I'm amazed how many times, not just in this episode, but in the last few, that I've been referring back to some of those early coaching documents we use, but the 3 whys.
White, yeah.
And we would use this when we were trying to help business owners try to figure out kind of their marketing messages. Why does that matter? Why is that important? But even to do that with ourselves, well, I want to lose 20 pounds. Well, why? Why is that important to you?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because I'll feel better. Well, why is that important to you? And to ask those, the whole purpose of the why, the 3 why question, is to ask yourself the why question until it finally hits an emotional reaction.
Right.
Yeah.
You're getting at now something that really
get to
matters.
the core, right?
Yeah.
And so I think one of the first steps is to do that exercise with whatever change you're trying to make, is get to the core of why it matters. And it might take 3, it might take 20 whys before you get to that place.
Love that.
I think that's so good. Keegan and Leahy, and we'll put this they're in the work. They've been featured at Harvard. This book has been around for a long time. It's foundational in the work of transformation, called Immunity to Change. And they talk about this model that oftentimes we set these goals. Like, I want to go to the gym. I want to lose 20 pounds. We keep coming back to that only because they're the most common New Year's resolutions that people make this time of year.
Yeah.
And they said, and yet we're not going to the gym, and we keep eating a bunch of junk food and whatever else. And we're not sure what's going on. And they say that our brain creates an immunity to anything that's foreign to it. So if we're used to a certain behavior, if we value certain things, anything that comes into competition with our existing values, there will be an immune response to try to flush it out. For example, why am I perhaps still eating junk food and eating the wrong kind of foods? Well, perhaps there's a competing value underneath the surface of friendship and spending time with family. And there's a fear that if I start eating differently, that might get violated or that might get impeded upon, right? Right. So the social connection value is actually competing with which is existing in you, is actually resisting, creating this immune response to your stated desire for change. And so getting present, I love, like, getting present, you got to go a bit deeper than just, well, this is what I want to do. Why is this important? What do I hope the outcome will be? What would it look like if I achieved this? What would it look like if I didn't? Like, beginning to have those deeper conversations. But again, this requires some of what we talked about in other episodes, slowing the fuck down and thinking it through before just making false empty promises to yourself that you're probably not going to follow up on.
A lot of people will ask me, like, well, I know I want to change on whatever it is they want to change, but I just can't get motivated. Well, motivation isn't something that you're born with. It's something that is cultivated over time. And some of the books that we've referenced, and another great one is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And I remember when one of my mentors, she gifted this to me maybe 8 years ago. And it was such an eye-opening book because it really talks about the compounded effect of those small changes. So when people say, well, I'm just not motivated. Well, you don't just wake up and decide to be motivated. Your motivation really comes.
Is there a motivation pill we can take? I'm sure there's a pill for everything.
But it's cultivated through that consistency. It's almost like a farmer who plants his seeds. Well, he's not expecting next week for all of the corn to be, harvested. That comes over time. He's tilling it. He's cultivating it, all of that kind of stuff. So that then the seeds. So, and it's the same thing with motivation. So when people always say, well, I don't know how to change, start by, like you said, Kate, like those small steps, and over time, your motivation is going to start to grow and develop and deepen.
Yeah.
I love that.
And each step will fuel the next step.
Right.
It's almost like you're fueling yourself as you start to grow.
Yes. You're training yourself.
Right? Training yourself.
Two words that acronyms that I developed in the last several months, just in just trying to understand how change happens in our lives and how true transformation takes place, are the words lag and the word act. And I'll give this to you really, really quickly. Lag is a term we talk about, internet lag. Internet lag is the time it takes takes or the delay between when the signal is sent and when it's received, right? So if there's a lot of latency, which lag is the slang word for, the short form for, in the network, it means there's a lot of delays between.
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah. So lag. You talk to any gamer who does online gaming, you talk about lag. Lag is the bane of every gamer because lag can mean the difference between winning or losing, right? But lag stands for learning. It stands for adoption and growth. And so for me, the way there's always lag between when we learn something new or we make a decision, there's a learning can be learning a new concept. We learn a new concept that's interesting, but how many things that we learn, read, come across, hear, actually make it into our practice? So very few,
right?
Right? Like just learning is not enough. Beyond learning something new or becoming aware of something, then there's this notion of I have to adopt it as my own, right? That's what the A stands for, adoption. I'm going to adopt that as my own, as something I want to implement, something I want to take in. The G is the tough part, growth in practice. You don't even grow right away, even after you adopt it. You may learn it, you may adopt it, but now I've got to grow. And how do I grow? By practicing it. Another similar word is the word act, right? Act stands for awareness. It starts by becoming aware I want to make a change or aware of something that I want to shift in my life. But then I have to commit to it. Awareness, I loved what Jim said when he was on the show. Awareness does not transform, it merely informs. I have to make the commitment, then start taking the steps, and then I enter the T stage, training. I start training in that new thing, and it's going to be over time as I grow in practice or I train that is going to begin now to make its way into my new way of seeing the world and experiencing the world. But again, we are so impatient. We want to go from learning and awareness to, look, I've done it, right? And it's just not the way
But I think
it works.
those two words that you've used, lag and act, is it's just practical advice that people can start to use.
I've already copyrighted it.
Well then. As actionable steps, because the next question people have are, so how do I do this? I'm stuck, in whatever change I'm trying to make. So how do I kind of figure out what steps to take? So if we were to talk about that.
Yeah. So the first thing I say about stuck is we're never as stuck as we think we are. Stuck in many cases is an illusion, right? It's and I'm not saying, listen, I've been in seasons of my life where I felt terribly stuck. But what I realized is where I was stuck is in my head, right? What was going on between these 2 ears of mine was the real problem. It wasn't actually the external forces or the external resistance or anything else. It was resistance between my brain. So I think part of getting unstuck, whether it's you're trying to make a change and it's not working, or you're stuck in a relationship, or you're stuck in a dead-end career, whatever the case may be, you're just not as ever stuck as you think you are. There's always a way forward.
Well, and you're always going to get stuck. So like part of change is getting stuck. Like it's just as you things start to shift around you, something at some point is not going to go exactly to plan, right? Whether you get stuck, you're stuck in the mud, or you just went off course, whatever that is, it's never just going to go the way you want it to. So
and being okay with that,
being okay with being stuck. Okay, I'm stuck in the mud for 4 hours. Okay. You're stuck. Like if that happened to you and you were driving, you'd be like, oh, this sucks. But you wouldn't then never get back in your car and drive again. Right. But we have this mindset that when we get stuck, it's over, right? Oh, that's it. Now I'm stuck. I'm done.
This was a mistake. I should never have started this journey in the first place.
I'm failing at this.
And I think it is one of the first things you need to do when you feel stuck is to identify what you mean by stuck. And so to
put words around it.
Put some words around it. We say this so often, when we name something, we often take away the power it has.
Right.
And
name it to tame it.
To tame it. So this notion of, when I say I'm stuck, what do I really mean? What does that look like practically? What does it truly look like? And we, again, another theme that has really come out over the last number of episodes is the journaling, the writing it down, getting your thoughts out. And that's certainly when you're stuck, one of the first things you should do is open up a new pad with a pen and start writing down in that notebook, what am I stuck about? What does this look like? How does this feel? Just get it all out. So now you can look at it and say, okay, now it's something I can deal with. I can solve this, or I can begin to build a plan to solve it because I've identified.
Stuck is not an emotion as well.
Right,
I want to let's get clear.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about feeling words, a feeling stuck is actually not an emotion.
Yeah.
Like I said, in many cases, it's an illusion. So getting clear. Yeah. I think beyond even, I think writing things down, great place to start. Sometimes you may need to go beyond that. Who do you talk to? Who are the people that you can, who are your wise counselors, right? Yeah. Again, careful who you talk to when you're stuck, because if you surround yourself or have people in your life that are very negative or have a victim mindset,
stuck-minded people,
with stuck-minded people, you're not going to get unstuck hanging around with people that have a victim mentality or pessimists, or even, I would say, to borrow Ben Bergeron's model, the overly optimistic people that gloss over the real shit that's showing up.
You'll get over it.
Right. Because again, the pessimist is telling themselves stories, the victim is telling themselves stories, the optimist is telling themselves stories. Yep. It's the realist who's able to look at the situation head on and say, okay, so here's the opportunity, here's the challenge, what's the way forward? But doing that on your own, let's face it, we're not wired to do this alone. We are wired for community. And so meaningful change, trying to do that on your own, trying to get unstuck in that process on your own, it's going to be really tough. It took me, I was thinking about like heroes based on another episode we were doing and about significant people in my life. And I don't really have heroes. There's been people that have influenced over time. I think I told you this earlier. If I was to list two people, it would be Jim Harrington and Sherry Kane, right? Who have changed my life and helped me transform in ways I never thought possible. But they're not heroic in the way that perhaps society would portray what a hero looks like. Yeah. But it's having the right people in your life that can help you challenge the illusions you're creating and the stories you're telling yourself and help you find the way. There's always a way forward.
But I like that you mentioned the community piece because I just had this conversation with my daughter last week. If something is not working, take a look at your environment, and it might be being open to other people that are going to be more, not necessarily so supportive, yes, but more open to helping you with whatever it is that you're trying to change. It might not be the circle that you're in right now. And I know when people start to ask or think about, well, how do I measure that progress? So I'm on this journey of change with whatever it is. How do I measure that progress? Part of having that right community might be being really open and vulnerable to feedback and having those conversations with whoever that person is around, give me feedback on how either I'm doing so far or here's what I've done so far, and be super open to that. I think that's such a great way to be able to measure your progress if you're open to getting that feedback. And it might not be feedback that we want to hear because nobody wants to hear shitty feedback, but it might be feedback that we need to start to make little tweaks on whatever.
Yeah, it's also like encouragement. Like you were talking about one of your leaders. I was on with Dr. Sherry, who's now famous. But I was talking to her and she's like, Kate, have you because I've had a lot of change in the last, I'm going to say 9 months. Yeah. And she's like, have you stopped and celebrated any of your wins? And I'm like, when you were saying that, it was reminding me because I could hear Sherry and I'm like, no, look, I haven't done it. And she's like, okay, but you've done la, 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 la. And I'm like, right. Okay. So having that person, and Sherry's not in my day to day, obviously, but she just gives you that, which for me, it was a sounding board of great, you have all this other stuff you want to get to, but do you know how much you've done? Yeah. Are you honoring yourself? Are you loving on yourself? She's like, you're so busy taking care and loving on everyone else. And I remember just being like, oh, I get to celebrate this. Yeah. And I don't think I've ever celebrated myself. Afterwards, I remember just being like, oh shit, it's bigger than this. But
I love that we have that reminder. But it's nice when we get people to celebrate us. But I'm a firm believer that you need to celebrate yourself. You
100%.
Can't rely on other people to do that for you. As nice as it is when we're recognized, celebrated.
Huge.
If we're not doing that for ourselves,
100%.
Yeah. It's. I think we're so obsessed and focused on what's wrong that we stop celebrating what's strong and building on that. Yeah. So celebrating the growth, celebrating the small wins, celebrating how far you've come. Again, we often, I go back to the statement about we overestimate what we can do in a day, but we underestimate what we can do in a year. If we look from day to day, we might not be able to see much progress. Yeah. But start thinking about where you were 3 months ago, where you were 6 months ago, where you were a year ago, and I can guarantee if you're on a growth, if you're got a growth mindset and you're leaning into that journey, there'll be plenty of stuff to celebrate. And you talk about encouraging yourself, right? The word encourage, I love it. It literally means in the original Greek to put your courage into someone else. But we need to learn that skill for ourselves, because I agree with you. We are our own primary caretaker, right? Caregiver. I am my own primary caregiver. If I look to someone else to do that for me, I used to do that in my relationships. I used to do that in my life. We're going to be disappointed. But the art of encouraging yourself is the ability to look at the journey and see the wins and say, I'm grateful for that. Look, I can see that. I celebrate that. I mark it in time. And this is the power of reflective practice. It is about celebrating. It's also about looking at increasing your awareness about other areas you want to continue to grow in, or the same area you want to continue to evolve in. But if we can't celebrate, that's why it's so hard. I think one of the reasons it's so hard, it just feels like we're never making progress, and we've got to be able to see the progress.
Yeah. Right? And I think putting pen to paper on those little wins as well, because we forget so easily. We get so caught up in all the things we're not doing that we forget all of that. Yeah. As we start to wrap things up on, learning about how we can implement change, work through change, all of that. We'll go around the table here, but what is one small thing, one small change that you guys would kind of come out and say that our listeners could implement today that could lead to a richer life tomorrow?
I got to say, I say this one a lot, but pause. I think just like pause, get present, spend time with yourself. It's reflection. We were talking about that a lot. Maybe it's because it's near the end of the year. I don't know. So we're like starting to reflect back. I think just spending time with yourself and figuring out, that can lead to change. It can lead to no change. I think it just gets you present to where you are in your life. Yeah. And we're so uncomfortable with it in general that I think spend time with yourself, get to know yourself, challenge yourself. What do you want? Where do you want to be? And I think that can help you shape the life you want.
Yeah, I love that. I would add, just do you. Give yourself permission to be yourself. Don't let the resolutions you make or the commitments you make be because of some external pressure or expectation, or it's what society wants or your family wants or your friends want. Get clear on what you want and start leaning into that. That's where change starts to come alive.
Yeah, I would, right from the tattoo on my arm, is show yourself some grace. This notion of the compassion and the kind of tying in a little bit with what you just said, I would say, love yourself, accept yourself, recognize that making those changes isn't going to change who you are. It's not going to change how you accept yourself. If you don't, you have to start there. So start with just simply showing grace to yourself.
Yeah. Love that.
And I'd probably finish off by just adding, check your morning routine. What are you doing every morning when you wake up? As soon as we wake up, we're already starting to think about all the things we need to do. Take that 5 to 10 minutes. For some of us, it might be a little shorter. For some of us, it might be a little bit longer. But to Kate's point, pausing, journaling some of your thoughts, all of those things are easy to do, but easier not to do. But before we start hopping on the gram and going through all social media and all that, check your morning routine, because how you start your day is how you run your day.
Yeah, absolutely. I love
It's a good conversation today, guys. Really good conversation.
Great. Really great.
Thanks for joining us today and choosing us to listen to. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because we do value your feedback, and sharing is caring. You can check out our website at livingrichly.me, all of the show notes and the links for some of the books and everything that we talked about. And send us a message if there's certain things that resonated with you. We are so open to feedback, and we would absolutely love to hear from you. So until next time, continue living your best life.